The following is an audiophonic baseball experience. Hello, fellow Stoveminders. It is the 29th of November, 2019. It's a Friday. I don't know where you might be, but the sun is shining. I'm sick. I sound like garbage, but that's okay because I just took a look at the stove and it's on and it's simmering. It's at a good simmer. Deals are being made. Things are happening. And the winter meetings are still just around the corner, about a week and a half away. I'll give a shout out to the Psycho Gang, the Harperheads, the Hampleheads, Central Broship, the Schwar Bros, all the apologists, all the trash can bangers. I'll give a shout out to Tomboy Media for leading the charge in fresh, new, young 21st century baseball content. And a big ups to the entire country of Japan. Ohayo gozaimasu. Well, the reason the stove is on is thanks to a few teams with bright futures who have been making moves. Stuff you like to see. The team that turned the stove on in the first place, that was the Atlanta Braves. The Braves, who, of course, won the NL East last season. They got that young core. They're in the bigs. They're looking to do some things. They're looking to make some noise. Well, they've done it by bringing in 3 relief pitchers. Well, bringing 2 back and bringing in a new guy. A guy who is one of the top relievers on the free agent market, Mr. Will Smith, not the actor, who's coming in on a 3-year, $39 million deal plus an option. And Alex Anthopoulos and company weren't done there. They also brought back Chris Martin, 2 years, $14 million, and Darren O'Day for a 1-year deal worth $2.5 million. Starting off with Smith, he had an all-star season and he was a San Francisco Giant. The lefty made 34 of 38 save opportunities. He had a .276 ERA, 96 strikeouts, and 65 in the third innings. Ooh. Those numbers speak for themselves, and they weren't all that unusual compared to Mr. Smith's career averages either. Now, $13 million a year is a pretty high salary for a reliever. In fact, it makes Will Smith tied for 6th as the highest paid reliever in Major League Baseball, tied with Zach Britton, if you're wondering. And the highest paid relief pitcher in Major League Baseball is Mark Melancon, $19 million a year, who's the Braves closer. And I'm not going to split hairs over this matter because we're in an era of professional baseball where relievers matter more than they ever have before. But as far as the Braves go, they not only understand the value of relief pitching, particularly with their rotation, which is a lot of guys who are either young or who've had good seasons, but overall aren't like bona fide, top of the rotation guys. So it's good to have a backup. Correct. And they're also going to be a playoff team, and in the playoffs, the bullpens mattered a lot. In 2019, the Braves bullpen was actually pretty good. They were above average in save percentage, in holds, where they were 3rd in the majors, so their middle relief was looking pretty good. And their relievers the team had a record in relief of 37-19, which is pretty good. But might as well provide some reinforcements. As for the other guys that they brought back, well, Chris Martin, who the Braves had got from the Rangers last year in a trade. A lot of his primary numbers don't really jump off the page, but his underlying numbers, like his FIP, his walk-to-strikeout ratio, are pretty good. And as for Darren O'Day, this is not the Darren of yesterday. You might remember when he was good with the Orioles. Those days are over. He only pitched in 5 1/3 innings last season. All of them came in September after he came back from injury. But, this is a veteran who's had a track record of success in the past. There's an assumption that he's recovered from his injury. The Braves had him on the team last year, so they know where he's at health-wise better than anybody else. And clearly that was enough to bring him back on a 1-year plus option deal. So a good set of moves for the Braves. That Melanson, Will Smith 1-2 punch could be deadly. And I'm really hoping there's plenty of situations next season where Will Smith relieves Chris Martin or vice versa, because those are also famous people. So at this point, the stove was on. And the Chicago White Sox said, listen, we got a foundation. We got these young guys in the majors or lurking. Some of these guys are coming off huge breakthrough campaigns. Talking Yohan Moncada, Lucas Giolito, Tim Anderson led the leagues in batting average. And Jose Abreu had a huge year as well, and he was a pending free agent. The White Sox gave him a qualifying offer. Abreu accepted, which you could argue was a little surprising because this is a guy who in 2019 hit 33 home runs plus 38 doubles and a league-high 123 RBIs. He batted .284, and he led the major leagues in ground into double plays with 24. But you could imagine, this guy was bound for a good payday. Well, maybe the reason he accepted the qualifying offer was because extension negotiations were underway. Because he got that extension 3 years, $50 million. He's sticking around. Great move by Rick Hahn and company to not just bring back Abreu, but make sure he's going to be around for a few years. And they weren't done there yet. They put their sights on the top catcher on the free agent market, Yasmani Grandal, and gave him a 4-year contract worth $73 million. And that there is the biggest hot stove move to date. Grandal kind of took a chance on himself last year's hot stove. I mean, this guy's a known commodity at this point. I think he's universally regarded as a good framer. He's one of the best hitting catchers in the major leagues, and he's led the majors in passed balls on multiple occasions. So even though back in the 2018 World Series, he was letting balls pass, well, we knew that. We knew that was his Achilles heel. But for whatever reason, either because he thought he could increase his value or he wasn't getting the kind of offers he wanted, Grandal took a 1-year deal to play with the Brewers. And it paid off. He batted .246, which is about what you could expect. Hit 28 home runs, 26 doubles, 77 RBIs, 380 on-base percentage. This guy is a walk machine. He got that payday. Once again, that's 4 years, $73 million. Quick math, that's $18.25 million a year. And now the White Sox lineup is looking a little something like they got Tim Anderson, they got Moncada, they got Eloy Jimenez, they got Yasmani Grandal, and they got Jose Abreu. And you might be thinking, oh, well, the White Sox, they had a good catcher last season, Mr. James McCann. Not Brian McCann or Jason McCann or any of those other McCann catchers floating around the majors. True. James McCann had a good year last year, but it was easily his best season to date. You know, it's fair to assume that might have been a fluke. So why not bring in a guy that you know is going to produce? And I was reading a little into this, and if you wanted to shift around the guys on the scorecard a little bit, you could have McCann catch, Grandal play first base where he has experience, and move Abreu, who's not necessarily a good defender, to the designated hitter spot. Looking pretty good, man. Rick Renteria, he's going to have a good time with this ball club next season. With the top catcher off the market, a bunch of teams were like, hey, we got to get a catcher now. That's exactly what happened. The catcher market has developed like wildfire. The Atlanta Braves, yeah, we're not done talking about them. They said, you know what, this Travis d'Arnaud guy, maybe he's finally healthy, or maybe not. Nevertheless, they gave him a 2-year deal worth $16 million. d'Arnaud, who's been fairly well regarded since he was a prospect, he's only appeared in 100-plus games in 3 of his 7 seasons thus far. 2019 was one of those years. He split that season between 3 teams, but he ended up in 103 games, batting .251 with a .745 OPS, both of which were above career average, 32 extra base hits, and he ranked above average in all of my favorite major defensive metrics, framing, caught stealing percentage, and fielding percentage. But he did post negative defensive runs saved. Just by a notch, but negative. However, all of that was enough to convince the Braves they could bring him on board. He will now form a tandem with Tyler Flowers, and it's a nice complementary pairing because Flowers is a better defensive catcher and a worse hitter than d'Arnaud, who, offensively speaking, is definitely above average as far as backstops go. So, not a bad move for the Braves. $8 million a year for a guy who might just end up getting injured and missing the whole season? I don't know. We'll have to see. Well, after those two moves, teams got busy. The Tampa Bay Rays brought back Mike Zunino on a one-year deal, $4.5 million with an option, which is exceptional because Zunino batted .165 in 2019. And he's a .202 career hitter over 7 seasons. The guy can catch. That's kind of all you care about. The Rays also have Michael Perez. Might as well keep the tandem intact. And as for somebody going to a new team, well, the Rays expansion brothers over in Arizona signed Stephen Vogt to a one-year contract worth $3 million. Vogt, who missed all of 2018 to shoulder surgery, had a solid bounce-back campaign last season. He batted .263, .314, .490, smacked 24 doubles. And with the D-backs now, he's going to form a tandem with their catcher of the future, Carson Kelly, who they acquired last a hot stove in that big Paul Goldschmidt trade. Kelly was supposed to be Yadier Molina's heir. Didn't do too much in the majors as a Cardinal, but last year in his first substantial season, he hit pretty well. And, I mean, you know, young catchers, there's going to be some growing pains, so why not bring in a veteran like Vogt, who's been around since 2012, to teach him a few things? And the catcher market was not done there yet. No, the Washington Nationals, the defending World Series champions, they decided to bring back Yan Gomes on a 2-year deal worth $10 million. Gomes did not have the best season at the plate last year. He hit only .223, did smack 28 extra base hits, .316 on base. You know, the dude takes walks. You like to see that. He formed an effective tandem last year with Kurt Suzuki. That will continue. He is an above average defender by everything from 5+ defensive runs saved to his freaking range factor to 31% caught stealing rate, just 5 percentage points above league average. Yeah, you like what you see. But as I said again, he did not have a very good season at the plate, which I think begets his $5 million a year salary. So with that, the free agent catcher market stands as such. Teams might be looking at the likes of Jonathan Lucroy, Martin Maldonado, Robinson Chirinos, Wellington Castillo, Francisco Cervelli if he's healthy, and if they're willing to take a bit of a risk, maybe a guy like Blake Swihart or Matt Wieters. But overall, not really any bona fide starters left. So a team looking for a catcher might be looking at the trade market instead. And that's where we can segue over to the Cubscast portion of this program, because our boy Wilson Contreras has been involved in some trade rumors. Now, I think people overreacted to this a little bit because here's what happened. Other teams were asking Theo Epstein and company about Wilson Contreras. It's not like the Cubs were shopping Willie. Other teams were inquiring. And that's to be expected because A, this is the part of the hot stove where everyone's doing their due diligence. And B, the Cubs front office has made it clear that they're willing to move some of these guys like Contreras, who are proven at the major league level, who are young, who are controllable, and who are cheap. Will they actually pull the trigger on a Contreras trade? maybe. Because Victor Caratini, he can play at the major league level. And feasibly, the Cubs could then get another catcher either off the market or digging into the system. I guess they don't really have anybody in the system because Miguel Amaya is still a couple years away. But they can make it work without Contreras. The return would have to be great. I'm just going to say that now. Like, impact guy, get a top starter or something for him, because Contreras is one of the best hitting catchers in the majors. If you take away his frame, and he's pretty good behind the plate, he's got a cannon for an arm. I think he's just going into arbitration or something. He's still got like 3 years of control after this. I might be wrong. I was not wrong. He does have 3 years of team control remaining. So, hey, we'll see. In regards to some of these other young controllable assets that the Cubs might be interested in trading, Javier Baez has been getting some extension offers. We don't know the details, but I like to see this because I love Javi. The dude is a firecracker. There's just so much to his game, for better or for worse, but he's fun to watch at least, and he's highly productive. The guy's been playing MVP baseball at times in his young career. Give him that contract offer because, hey, if you remember, Mr. Chris Bryant got an 8-year, $200 million offer, and he said no. And I expect that to be the case no matter what kind of money gets dangled in front of him, because with Scott Boras behind his ass, he's going to wait until free agency regardless and try to get like a Bryce Harper type deal. That's the situation with Bryant as I see it. So why not take a look at some of these other guys? Maybe give Schwarber an offer. I don't freaking know. But it'll be interesting to see what the Cubs front office does, because they have been open about trading these guys, and they're kind of in a tough position because, you don't want to trade Contreras or Baez or Bryant. You can't imagine them dealing Rizzo because he's, just so important to this organization. And then you got the guys like Schwarber, Almora, and Happ, and Russell, I guess, since he still hasn't been non-tendered, who were highly regarded prospects at some point, but have not necessarily had the best major league career to date. Even if you want to keep all these guys and you just want to shed some salary, no one's taken Jason Hayward's seagull of a contract. I wouldn't even call it an albatross, because an albatross is a little too glamorous. On the other side, as far as guys the Cubs might be looking to bring in, apparently they've been checking in on Whit Merrifield of the Kansas City Royals, which I like. I love Merrifield's skill set. Matches up with what the Cubs want. He plays all over the infield, but primarily second base, which is what the Cubs need. But I mean, look at this. The Royals are in the middle of a rebuild. They're going to be looking for prospects. And they've been pretty cold on moving Merrifield in the recent past. He's been involved in trade discussion prior to this, and they haven't really budged on him. I think they really like Merrifield, or they're waiting for a really high offer. So I don't see that going through, but it's an indication of what we knew, I guess, as far as what the Cubs want to add. What they have added is a bunch of new coaches. First and foremost, there was, of course, the departure of Joe Maddon, who will now manage the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. The return of David Ross, who is now the Cubs skipper. I think like a lot of people were skeptical of this move when it first happened, because Ross's public persona was not exactly conducive to what the Cubs needed, which was a manager who was, a guy who could hold players accountable, who was a little more of a hard ass, a little more hands-on than Maddon. But I watched their press conference, and Ross was pretty adamant of hey, listen, I'm not as nice as I seem. Yeah, and you know what? I've warmed up to the move, considering the fact that Ross did have a chance to manage in spring training back when he was a Cubs player, in regards to the role he had when he was with the Cubs, which was sort of a go-between between Maddon and the clubhouse, given his baseball IQ, given how high Epstein and Hoyer were on him. I'm excited to see what David Ross will do with this team now. As for the other coaching hires, the Cubs have a new bullpen coach. His name is Chris Young. He's not the 6'10" recent ex-pitcher Chris Young. He's some random jabroon who was the Phillies pitching coach last season. And he was only their pitching coach for 1 year. And it was a pretty bad year. Virtually all the Phillies starters took a step back, except for Aaron Nola, which is really discouraging to now have this guy in the bullpen where, unlike last season where the Cubs bullpen had a lot of veterans, where you can kind of be like, okay, you know what, these guys, you know what they're doing. Now, the Cubs bullpen, at least at the moment, is looking kind of young. Guys like Brad Wick, North Vancouver's very own Rowan Wick, Alec Mills, potentially Adbert Alzolay, Dwayne Underwood maybe. Young guys with not a lot of major league experience. You look at what happened last year. I mean, Victoria's own Nick Pivetta lost his rotation spot. Vince Velasquez took a step back, as did Zach Eflin, and Jake Arrieta had his worst season since Baltimore. That's not very encouraging. I mean, if a couple guys have a down year, like, okay, you know what, yeah, maybe some guys got hurt or something. But when 4 of your 5 starters have down years, I think there's a reason the Phillies fired this guy. And I'm not super excited about having him in the bullpen. I like Tommy Hotovy, the Cubs pitching coach, but I don't like this hire, even just for the bullpen. As far as other moves, the Cubs have brought in Mike Napoli as their quality assurance coach. I don't know what a quality assurance coach does, but Napoli was apparently a great clubhouse guy. I love the beard. So we'll see how this goes. And they also have a new bench coach since Mark Loretta is leaving the organization. Well, the new bench coach is the former Padres manager, Andy Green. Green wasn't super successful with the Padres given the talent in that clubhouse. But I mean, here on one hand, you have a guy who's experienced, who could maybe give Ross a little bit of advice. You have a guy who is apparently pretty amicable with the players. And if Ross wants to step up into a headbuster role, you could have a guy like Andy Green be the yin to his yang, or vice versa. But compared to the Chris Young move, I like bringing in Green, and I like bringing in Napoli. So let's hope the bullpen doesn't torpedo. All right, shifting back to hot stove. Besides the Braves and White Sox, the other team that's been making a lot of moves so far is Andy Green's former team, the San Diego Padres. The big move they've been involved in is a 4-player trade with the Milwaukee Brewers. The Padres receive outfielder Trent Grisham and right-handed starting pitcher Zach Davies, while the Brewers get middle infielder Luis Urias and left-handed starting pitcher Eric Lauer. This is an interesting trade because a 4-man change of scenery situation. Starting off with Grisham and Urias. These are 2 young players. Both of them, one of them's 23, one of them's 22. They've gotten a bit of a taste of the major leagues. They are former top prospects, and they haven't exactly found that success yet. Grisham, who's at 51 games at the big league level, has batted .231 in that span with a .328 on base, 14 extra base hits. Not great. He can play all 3 outfield positions. He'll slot into that Padres outfield rotation, which is deep. Manuel Margot, Franchi Cordero, Will Myers, Hunter Renfroe, Nick Martini. So Grisham, who wasn't exactly getting a lot of playing time in Milwaukee, where you got Braun, Yelich, and Kane running that outfield, might not get a ton of playing time in San Diego either. I don't know how they're going to sort all that out, but if a change of scenery is what he's wanted, well, he's got that. And going the other way, Urias, who has played 83 Major League games to date, has batted just .221 in that span, .318 on base, 16 extra bases, 29 RBIs. He plays both shortstop and second base, though he's a little better at second. As for the Brewers' needs on that side, well, I mean, Keston Hiura is pretty solid at second base. Orlando Arcia, their shortstop, isn't the best, so feasibly they could maybe do a timeshare. And of course, third base is open with Mike Moustakas gone at the moment. Travis Shaw was dog ass last year, so maybe they move Arcia or Urias over to third. Both these guys, Grisham and Urias, are around for the long haul. They're under team control through 2025. As I mentioned, they're young guys. There's still room for development. Be interesting to see if they can fulfill their potential with these new clubs. And the other half of this trade is the pitchers, and that was an interesting one because both the Padres and the Brewers are teams that are in the playoff discussion, and both of them have a need in the rotation. Well, Zach Davies, Eric Lauer, both these guys are kind of middle rotation dudes, As for Davies, last season he had 31 starts, was 10 for 7, 3.55 ERA, albeit with a 4.56 FIP, a WHIP of 1.29, and that's all in 159 plus innings pitched. In his career, his ERA is 3.91, his FIP's 4.22, and he has a 6.4 strikeout rate, which is not very. But despite not being a swing and miss guy, he's been somewhat effective. Again, he'll slide in somewhere in the middle of the Padres rotation, and he has 2 more years on the contract. So more of a depth piece to most teams. As for Lauer, he's under team control for longer. The Brewers could have him until after the 2024 season. Lauer's only appeared in 2 seasons in the big leagues with 261 innings under his belt. In that span, he has a 4.40 ERA with a 4.35 FIP, so slightly worse than Davies, although his strikeout rate's at 8.2, which is much better. So the exchange there is Padres are getting a guy who's a little better and a little more proven than Davies, while the Brewers are getting the guy who's a little raw, but can at least, strike out some guys in Lauer. There's no clear winner to this. I almost want to give the Padres the W because Grisham has performed better than Urias so far, and Davies has performed better than Lauer so far. So they're getting the better guys on paper. But so much of this is like, how are these guys going to play over the next few years? Brewers made some good long-term moves in this deal. But again, we'll have to see how it all pans out and how the respective managers are going to fit these guys, the position players, into the lineup, because there's no clear spot where either of these guys are going to get a full-time job. And watch for the Padres to potentially trade some of these outfielders because they got way too many outfielders. Even in that Yasiel Puig, Trevor Bauer deal that the Padres were a part of, where they traded Franmil Reyes, one of their starting outfielders, to Cleveland, and they received from the Reds their top prospect, or at least one of their top prospects, an outfielder named Taylor Trammell. He got way too many guys playing out there, so maybe they're going to trade one of them. Winter meetings are around the corner. Trade somebody. Jesus Christ. Well, the Padres weren't done there in regards to the rotation. As I mentioned, they could use some help because, Chris Paddock looks sick. Joey Lucchesi's got some potential, but who else you got? Nobody. So they decided to go out and sign left-hander Drew Pomeranz, the Orange, to a 4-year contract worth $34 million. Now, Pomeranz has had what I will call a tumultuous career. He's been all over the place, both stat-wise and uniform-wise. Last season, he got off to a really bad start in San Francisco. He got traded to Milwaukee. He threw 26 innings out of the pen, and he looked pretty freaking good. In those 26 innings, he struck out 45 guys. He had a WHIP under 1. He had an ERA of 2.39 and a complimentary FIP of 2.68. And back when he was with the Giants, he was starting and not starting very well. So he's looking like a swingman. He's looking like a guy who can do some long relief. He's looking like a Tyler Chatwood sort of dude. What stands out to me in this deal is the length. 4 years for a guy who's just been so inconsistent is a little baffling, though I guess you could say, well, you know what? There's not a lot of financial risk to go along with this deal. Just over $8 million a year for who could be your number 5 starter. It's not bad. It's not bad. Again, compared to Tyler Chatwood, who's making like $15 million a year or something to be a long reliever. So not an awful deal for the Padres. Not exactly what they needed, but it's a depth signing. at least having pitching depth, that's something. But I'm looking for San Diego to land a big name starter, because that's what they really, really need to go to the next level. And speaking of starting pitchers, the last big signing that I want to touch on in this program episode is right-hander Kyle Gibson going to Texas. Signed with the Rangers, 3 years, $30 million. Gibson, who has spent his whole career up until his point with the Twins in 2019, he had some illness issues. Got sick a few times, but he did end up throwing 160 innings. 4.84 ERA is not good. 4.26 FIP is a little bit better. He was a strikeout pruning average, and he's a ground ball pitcher. Not awful, sort of a mid to back end sort of dude. At $10 million a year, that's kind of what you're expecting. His health history is not great, but I mean, this is such a Rangers signing, because they gave Lance Lynn a 3-year, $30 million deal. They got Mike Minor a 3-year, $28 million deal. Got all these random guys who could be mid to back rotation dudes. Get them on a relatively cheap contract. And you know what? Lynn and Minor had good seasons last season. Will Gibson do the same? We have a renaissance in Arlington? Who knows? But one thing I do know is the Rangers they're trying to stay relevant. They could have traded Galley. They could have traded Shin-Soo Choo. They could have traded Andrews. Could have traded Nomar Mazara after that good first rookie season. But they did none of those things. They've kept all those guys. They haven't opted for the rebuild. And here they are adding a bunch of mediocre to below average starting pitching for $8 to $10 million. I can't explain it. But I guess good luck to them. Remember last year they kind of got off to a good start. Maybe the Rangers will do the same this year and trade some of these guys, because they're not going to be playing in October with the Rangers. And just to wrap things up, I want to run through a few minor moves / releases / DFAs. Well, the Seattle Mariners are always a team to watch, because Jerry Dipoto is an absolute madman at the helm. He loves to make crazy deals and moves. They kind of maxed out on the craziness last season, to the point where, if you remember, Dipoto was hospitalized over the winter meetings at the same time as they pulled off that Jean Segura trade. This year's hot stove so far, they've signed a couple ex-Chicago Cub pitchers with high upside and very low floors. Those guys are Kendall Graveman, who hasn't pitched since, I believe, 2017 due to injury, and Carl Edwards Jr., who owns a heck of a fastball and control issues. Edwards a reliever. Graveman has started in the past. It'll be interesting to see how they utilize him. Seattle's rotation last year was one of the worst in baseball, so they need all the help they can get. Interesting couple of moves, but befitting of a Mariners team that's in the early stages of a rebuild. Josh Harrison, and you might remember him. He was an important part of that Pirates team that was fairly competitive about 4 or 5 years ago. And in the last couple seasons, Harrison's career has taken a nosedive. Played last season in Detroit. Was bad. And here we are in November, and he's already accepted a minor league deal with the Philadelphia Phillies, which is telling, because he's not expecting to get a major league deal, I guess. If you remember last year, or I guess this year, but before the season, and what happened there was all these veterans were waiting around. They were hoping for a major league deal, and when they couldn't get one, they opted for the minor league deal. Josh Harrison is clearly not very confident in himself, because he's going straight to the minor league deal in November. I was reading the old MLB trade rumors, and apparently Harrison had offers from multiple teams, but he chose to go to the Phillies. So I'm guessing all those offers would have been minor league deals. Well, if Harrison can turn it around, that would be an asset to the Phillies, because he can play all over the infield, and that Philadelphia infield's a little spotty right now. I know they're not huge on Michael Franco at third. There's been talk of moving Scott Kingery from second to center field, with Odubel Herrera being an asshole. So, as for DFA news, well, on one hand, there is the New York Yankees fresh new saga with Jacoby Ellsbury. Now, Ellsbury, the former Red Sox outfielder, then he went over to the Yankees. He signed a nice big contract, and he started getting hurt. Got hurt a lot. In fact, he hasn't played since 2017. Missed all of last season and the one before that. And so what did the Yankees do? They got rid of him. They released him. Going back a little bit, that contract that he signed, 7 years, $153 million. There is $26 million remaining on that contract that the Yankees are going to have to eat. I don't know if Ellsbury's ever going to come back, but there's been a second chapter to that whole situation. The Yankees are trying not to pay the $26 million because apparently Ellsbury, as part of his rehab, took some unauthorized out-of-club treatment, and that apparently voids his whole contract. So it's funny to see the Yankees being such penny pinchers. I'm kind of interested to see how that ends up. Kind of sucks knowing that, Ellsbury had a good career. That guy just completely tanked. But them's the breaks. Speaking of the breaks, the Yankees also designated Greg Bird. Bird, you might remember, had a good rookie season and then started getting injured right away. And in the course of the last 3 years, he has hit under 200 in each of those seasons. In 2019, he managed just 41 plate appearances. But he does have a few years of control left, and he's only 27 years old. So there's a chance we might see Greg Bird again, but it won't be in the Yankees uniform, at least not the next time we see him. And Wei-Yin Chen, Marlins pitcher. He had 1 year remaining on his contract, but the Marlins opted to release him. They still owe the guy $22 million. Chen, was good at one point, but then just in the last 2 years took a turn for the worst. He lost his spot in the rotation at one point. Classic Marlins baseball. And the last move I want to touch on deals with a team I was talking about earlier, them White Sox. Namely regarding infielder Yolmer Sanchez. Now, Yolmer is 27 years old. He's got 3 years remaining on his contract. He's in arbitration. He's projected to earn over $6 million this upcoming season. He won a Gold Glove this year. He's not a bad hitter. I mean, he hits .244 over his career, but his last 3 seasons are much better than his first 3. In 2019, he hit .252 with a .638 OPS. He's not a slugger, but he's notched 19 or more doubles in 4 of his 6 seasons. He gets a lot of walks, so he also gets a lot of strikeouts. And as I mentioned, Gold Glover. The guy can play ball. But the White Sox apparently did not see any room for Yolmer in their roster, so they decided to get him off the 40-man roster, and he cleared waivers, and now Sanchez is a free agent. I mean, if I was Rick Hahn, I would have hung on to the guy and tried to trade him. Maybe it was a 40-man thing, because the whole 40-man roster thing where, teams had to, have the 40-man roster ready soon. Maybe that was an issue, and, the White Sox, all this young talent, wanted these guys to be under team control instead of Rule 5 draft eligible, so they got rid of Sanchez. But the dude has value, or maybe he doesn't because he cleared waivers. And honestly, I'm not so in tune with the intricacies of Major League Baseball that I don't know why no team picked him up, because clearly he has something. So I'm interested to see what team takes a bite on him, to be honest. But yeah, he won't be on the White Sox next season. November is almost over. I'm glad to see the hot stove on and running. 2019 winter meetings will begin on December 8th in San Diego. Hope some big trays go down. In the meantime, Stoveminders, stay warm, stay hydrated, try not to get sick like I. This has been Stoveminders /Cubscast for the 29th of November, 2019, Friday.